In this video, we're going to go over what is a cliche. So, what is a cliche? What is slang? What are text message symbols? Reasons why you should avoid cliches, formal versus informal writing, and tone. So in this video, we're going to go over why do we need to avoid cliches in our writing. Today's presentation is a fun and easy one. I decided to create a shorter, more fun presentation this time. In this more fun presentation, I will be teaching you only one grammar rule. Isn't that easy? We do not use, and that one grammar rule is, we do not use cliches, slang, idioms, or text message language in our formal academic paper, because slang, cliches, idioms, and text message language are too informal and conversational for an academic research paper. So remember this one easy grammar rule. So informal versus formal English. Informal English is the way we speak and write when we are with our friends. Formal English is the way we speak and write when we are with our boss or older family members or our teacher. Code switching is the ability to switch social registers. That is, you change the way you talk depending on who you are talking to. When you switch from informal to formal English, you are code switching. And so all of these, like, yo, I have a great idea, what the, and LOL, and I'm on the fence. These are all examples of informal English that you're not going to put into your research paper. In informal English, we use you and your in our paper, but for our research papers, we're not going to use you and your. Second person case you and your is used in conversational English when you are talking with someone, when you do an oral presentation and you want to address the audience, and when you give directions to the reader how to do something. However, you and your is not used in academic writing. So when you write your academic research paper, replace you and your with a person and a person's. Informal English. John, you need to put on your seatbelt. Formal English. People need to put on their seatbelts. And other ways of having formal English is one needs to put on one's seatbelt. Americans need to put on their seatbelt. In formal English, replace you and your with a person, people, reader, American, he or she, or any other third-person case. Using you and your in an academic paper is too informal and too conversational. When we write an academic paper, we use a formal tone of English to sound professional. Incorrect. You need to vaccinate your children. Correct. People need to vaccinate their children. Correct. A person needs to vaccinate their children. Correct. Parents need to vaccinate their children. Most formal. One needs to vaccinate one's children. When we switch from formal to informal English, this is called code switching. For instance, if we are talking to our friend on the phone using slang words, some people using slang words, and then suddenly we switch from that to talking to our boss, that's called code switching. When we write English, we write in a more formal tone. Many people make the mistake of writing the way they talk, but when we write English, we have to use the correct social register of our language. We need to write in a more formal way because our audience is our boss, our teacher, and we want to project a more professional image of ourselves. When we write in a more formal tone, we avoid using cliches, idioms, and slang, which makes us appear uneducated and hick in a professional setting. If we have a regional accent, we get rid of that regional accent to sound more mainstream and formal. And so for me, I had to get rid of my New York accent when I lecture to students, but I switch over to my New York accent when talking with friends and family. So always be aware of your audience when you write. When we speak English, conversational English, that is when we speak in an informal way, we speak informally to close friends and family So when you're speaking with your friends and family, you could speak in your own dialect, use a lot of ungrammatical sentences, and use slangs, idioms, cliches in your speech. Some people use regional idioms and cliches, and it's only understood in that region of the US. As a rule, in academic papers or workplace writing, you should not write the way you talk. This is why written English has a more formal tone than spoken English, because written English is more formal than conversational English. Therefore, we do not use cliches in our writing. Slang, cliché, and idioms occur when we talk informally with friends and family. Do not use them in your academic writing. So what is the difference between idioms, slang, and cliches? Idioms are expressions that do not have a literal meaning. Rather, they establish the connotation by the way they are used in speech. Hit the hay is an idiom. You do not literally hit the hay, but the words take on another meaning altogether. Slang is the informal language of conversation, text messages, and other casual social communication among friends. WTF is an example of slang and text language. Cliches are expressions that are so common and overused that they fail to impart any real impact on your sentence. And an example of a cliche would be last but not least. At the beginning of the 20th century, new language was spread through radio. Then by mid-century, new language was spread through TV. Now it is the internet and social media that is the source for slang, more than radio and TV put together. The social media and the internet and the use of the smartphone has caused language to change at warp speed. A slang word can travel around the world in hours thanks to social media, internet, and texting. Interestingly, each country has its own text language. For instance, in English, LOL means lots of laugh. This translates to mort de rire, MDR, in French, which also means lots of laughter. So here are some examples of cliches. Last but not least, first come, first serve, every man for himself, for all intents and purposes, breathe a sigh of relief, better late than never, the early bird gets the worm. So early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Cool as a cucumber, thin like a pencil. So you want to avoid using all of those cliches in your academic writing. A cliche is a phrase people have used many, many times before. The first time someone said it, it was funny and witty. Now it is just dead language. Everyone uses cliches, but nobody notices it anymore. When we use cliches, it is a form of laziness. It means we are not creating original thought in our writing, but relying on old and used language to express our thoughts. Avoid cliche in writing. Instead, use descriptive language that accurately describes what you are seeing or feeling. What is wrong with cliches? Well, specific details and explanations make better evidence than generalizations and trite phrases. Cliches make you seem lazy. Cliches are a hedge when you don't want to do creative work. And cliches make you lose credibility because you sound too conversational. Let's say that you are on a study abroad applications review committee. You are responsible for making sure a limited amount of money goes to the most qualified applicants, and you have to read through hundreds of application essays. So here are two personal statements, examples. I'm a people person, so I'm certain to get along well with new people in a new country. I know how to adapt because I'm a jack of all trades. I'm also prepared to deal with adversity and learn from challenges because I know that every cloud has a silver lining. Versus a more formal presentation. I will be able to immerse myself in another country because I have experience as an ESL tutor interacting with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. Growing up in a military family taught me how to quickly adapt to new people and environments. I won't let the inevitable challenges of living abroad deter me from my educational goals. As my numerous failed experiments for my chemistry senior project show, challenges are profitable in the long run. I finally made a contribution to my field after 200 experiments. So when you write without the cliches and without the slang of jack of all trades, you sound more professional and more formal, and you are more likely to get hired. Who gets the money? Both applicants make the same basic argument about themselves, but the second one did it with more specificity. In other words, by using detailed evidence to reinforce her more general claims about herself, she sounds more professional, and she's the one that's going to get the job. The first applicant relied on cliches like, I'm a people person, jack of all trades, every cloud has a silver lining. Everybody has used those cliches, so we didn't learn anything specific about this person. The second applicant gets the money. This example shows the problem with cliches. They are general statements that do not add any detailed evidence or unique support to a piece of writing, whether the writing is a personal statement or an academic essay. Cliches make you seem boring. By using a cliche, you're telling your reader that you lack originality, making them want to yawn and stop reading your paper. Cliches make your writing and argument interchangeable with anybody else's. Make sure that your argument and writing are specific to you and your writing task. It is best to use the most precise wording in order to present evidence and support your arguments as clearly as possible. Specific details and explanations make better evidence than generalizations and trite phrases. Do people use slang? Why do people use slang? Because slang terms are often only understood by people in a certain group, using slang is, above all, a way to show that you belong. You show that you're one of the crowd by using terms that others don't understand, and you can connect with like-minded people who understand just what you mean by using the latest slang terms. For this reason, slang is often a mark of being cool, or at least in the know about something. People who are in with a group know the slang, and people who aren't in the group don't know the slang. Therefore, slang is a way to use language to separate yourself from others. The best example is the way each generation of teenagers use new slang to separate themselves from their tragically uncool, too old parents. However, over time, slang terms tend to die out from lack of use as groups move on to new terminology, or they may become so popular that they are absorbed into the common language. In this case, everyone understands the terms, and they aren't likely to be considered inappropriate or poor grammar anymore. This is because language grows and evolves over time as new words are added to the dictionary while old ones fall into disuse and disappear. So if I were to say to you, that's a groovy movie, you know, if you're under 50, you'll have no idea what groovy means. And that's because that was a slang that was used in the 1970s to mean this is a really great movie. So this is the reason why we don't use slang in our papers, because people over or under a certain age will not understand what you're talking about. Here are some more examples of cliches. Throughout history, as luck would have it, little did I know, in the nick of, and these are all cliches you need to avoid in your writing. Easier said than done, few and far between, last but not least, slowly but surely, you win some, you lose some, easy come, easy go, think outside the box, what goes around comes around, to avoid all of these cliches in your writing. And when we write our academic papers, we also want to avoid using text language such as Ella, LOL, LMAO, OMG, and so on. So you avoid using all of this. And avoid using blow off, messed up, yeah, ripped off, kinda, flipped out, gross, my bad, chill out, stoked. Can you think of more? So these are all of the examples of slang that you want to avoid using in your paper. Here are a bunch of more slang that you avoid in your papers. I'm not going to read them all out loud to you. How to get rid of slang cliches in your paper. So these red poppies, that's a kind of flower, are a dime a dozen. So instead of saying a dime a dozen, you would say these red poppies are very common. Instead of saying don't beat around the bush, you would simply say, John, just say what you really mean. And instead of saying he decided to bite the bullet, you would say he decided to do the undesirable thing he was avoiding. Instead of saying I'm going to call it a night, you're going to say, I'm going to bed. And instead of saying he's got a chip on his shoulder, you would say he's holding on to a grudge or a grievance that's making him very angry or callous. And instead of saying, would you give me some slack, you would say, don't be so hard on me. Don't cut any corners. That means don't take any shortcuts. She lets things get out of hand. Instead of saying get out of hand, you would say she lets things get out of control. And instead of saying going back to the drawing board, you would say I'm going to start over. So avoid those kind of cliches. And then idioms. Some idioms, which is the same thing as slang and cliches in this case, so some idioms that were once popular are no longer used. So cat's pajamas. This term was commonly used by flappers in the 1920s to mean that something was exciting, new, or excellent. Though it doesn't make much sense, it does use vivid imagery. This new phonograph is the cat's pajamas, and nobody talks like that anymore. Wallflower. This term describes a shy person. It was used in the early decades of the 20th century to describe a person, usually a girl, who preferred to stand along the wall instead of participating in a dance. You'll have more fun at the dance if you aren't such a wallflower. Oh my, don't have a cow. This term is used to try to calm someone. It was popularized by the TV show The Simpsons in the 1980s and 90s. Though you might still hear Bart say it in reruns, it's no longer very common to hear in conversation. Some idioms change their meaning over time, usually across generations. This keeps the word in usage, but can lead to some miscommunication between older and younger speakers. Busted! To your grandparents, busted probably means something that was broken. To your parents, it means getting caught doing something wrong. The latest use as an adjective to mean ugly. No, I won't go out with your little sister. She's busted. Okay, my generation, it means getting caught doing something wrong. Ride. Originally a verb for the act of being a passenger in a vehicle, this word evolved into a noun to describe a car. Most recently, my rides can mean sneakers. I got new rides to match my favorite shirt. So rides used to mean car. Now rides mean some kind of shoe or sneakers. So I got new sneakers to match my favorite shirt. So here, avoid using the word rides and use the word sneakers instead. Hip. It was an idiom. Originally hip or hep meant something very fashionable in the first half of the 20th century. It also evolved to mean someone into jazz and beatnik culture in the 1940s and 50s. Then the word hip changed to mean hippie to describe flower children of the 1960s. Today, hipster means a self-aware, artsy person. My hip grandfather plays the sax, but my hipster brother just makes homemade pickles. So the word hip has changed, and for me, I remember when hip meant somebody who dresses real hip, really fashionable. So you could tell that I come from an older generation in which I remember the older name of words. So idioms and cliches evolve. That means that in the 70s, teenagers said groovy or dig it to mean that something is cool. In the 1980s, teenagers said rad or super to mean something is cool. In the 60s, teenagers said right on to mean something was cool. In the 90s, teenagers said chill out, dude, to mean something was cool. What do teenagers say today to mean something is cool? Do teenagers these days say lit or epic to mean cool? So these before and after examples can aid you in spotting slang and removing it from your writing. Slang. The kid ripped off $100. Non-slang. The kid stole $100. Slang. The man was nailed for stealing the car. Non-slang. The man was convicted for stealing the car. Slang. I can't handle cramming for tests. Non-slang. I cannot handle studying for tests at the last minute. First person case. When we use first person case, we are talking about ourselves. First person case is anything written with I, me, us, we, our. First person case writing is considered informal English. It is used in autobiographies, narrative essays, creative writing, books, movies, and poems, but not in academic research papers. Second person case is when you use you and your in your writing. For instance, that sentence I just wrote is in second person case. Second person case is used in business letters, emails, personal communication, public speaking, food recipes, instructions, and technical writing. Second person case is not used in academic research paper. It is considered because second person case is considered conversational English. Third person case is used when we are talking about somebody else. When we use case studies, for instance, we are using third person case to talk about our patients, or for teachers, our students. Third person case is when we use he, she, they, and people's names. We use third person case in academic research papers because third person case is the most objective, the most credible, and the most professional of all the cases. Interestingly, is when you learn another language and you want to translate slang, Google Translate will not accurately translate slang. So that's why we avoid writing slang when we write our papers. And we should avoid slang when we talk with professional people and to people who know very little English. Google slang would come up with ridiculous translations for slang. Why do you think Google Translate cannot translate slang? Hit. Does hit the hay translate directly into going to sleep? No, because hit the hay means that you go to the barn and you sleep on the hay. And that's the end of this. Video on how to avoid using slang, idioms, and the like in your essay. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.